She bewitched an entire generation with a twitch of her nose and a sparkle in her eye. But beyond the magic of the small screen, Elizabeth Montgomery's real life was marked by private joys, personal battles, and a heartbreak the world seldom saw. Today, her abandoned home stands as a silent witness to a life once filled with laughter, love, and loss. From her beloved husband and 3 children to the fortune she left behind, and the tragedy that cut her story short. This is the unforgettable, bittersweet tale of a Hollywood legend. Montgomery entered the world on April 15, 1933, in the sun-soaked city of Los Angeles, California, the daughter of Broadway actress Elizabeth Daniel Bryan Allen and the silver screen's Robert Montgomery. Her roots stretched far beyond Hollywood, though her mother hailed from Kentucky and her father from New York, weaving a rich tapestry of American heritage with strong Irish and Scottish threads. Tragedy brushed against her early years when her elder sister, Martha Bryan Montgomery, named after their aunt, was born in 1931 but heartbreakingly passed away in infancy. She also had a younger brother, Robert B. Montgomery, Jr., completing a small, closely knit family, touched by both fame and loss. Through the branches of her family tree, the story turned even more intriguing. Montgomery's great-grandfather, Archibald Montgomery, had sailed from Belfast in 1847, leaving behind County Antrim for a new life in the United States. Decades later, genealogical discoveries would unearth an eerie connection. Elizabeth Montgomery and the infamous Lizzie Borden, forever linked in American folklore for an axe murder trial that gripped the nation in 1893, were in fact distant. Relatives, 6th cousins once removed, both descended from a 17th-century Massachusetts settler named John Luther. Astonishingly, Montgomery played Borden in the 1975 television film The Legend of Lizzie Borden, never knowing as cameras rolled that the character's bloodline flowed through her own veins. Her path to the screen wasn't a random inheritance of fame. Montgomery was educated at the Westlake School for Girls in Holmby Hills before heading east to New York City, where she completed her studies at the prestigious Spence School. With the bright lights of the stage calling, she refined her craft at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in Manhattan, dedicating 3 years to mastering the art of performance. Elizabeth Montgomery's first steps into show business felt almost predestined, given her lineage. She made her television debut alongside her famous father in his anthology series, Robert Montgomery Presents, occasionally joining his troupe of summer stock performers, a kind of theatrical family affair that nurtured her early love for the craft. By October 1953, Montgomery took her talent to the Broadway stage, making a memorable debut in Late Love. Her performance earned her a coveted Theatre World Award, a promising signal that her star was on the rise. The silver screen soon called, and in 1955 she landed her first film role in Otto Preminger's The Court Martial of Billy Mitchell. Not one to be confined to a single medium, she returned to Broadway in 1956 for The Loud Red Patrick, continuing to balance stage and screen with impressive grace. Throughout the late 1950s and early 60s, Montgomery became a familiar face in the world of live television dramas, a golden era when stories unfolded in real time and the stakes were exhilaratingly high. She lit up episodes of Studio One, Craft, Television Theater, The Twilight Zone, Burke's Law, The 11th Hour, Wagon Train, Boris Karloff's Thriller, and Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Her chameleon-like ability to inhabit diverse characters earned her critical acclaim, and in 1961 she received a Primetime Emmy nomination for her bold, emotionally charged portrayal of Rusty Heller, a Southern nightclub singer caught up in a web of crime and desire in The Untouchables. Her co-star in that episode, David White, would later share the small screen with her again as the ever-flustered Larry Tate in Bewitched. Montgomery's range was on full display in 1963 when she took on the role of Rose Cornelius in an episode of Rawhide, and appeared as a glamorous socialite swept up by a ruthless gangster played by Henry Silva in Johnny Cool. That same year, she showed her comedic side opposite Dean Martin and Carol Burnett in Who's Been Sleeping in My Bed? Directed by Daniel Mann. Even Alfred Hitchcock himself recognized her magnetic screen presence. After working with her on his television series, he hoped to cast her as Sean Connery's calculating sister-in-law in his psychological thriller Marnie, a role that might have added yet another intriguing dimension to Montgomery's already eclectic career. Sadly, scheduling conflicts kept her from stepping into that part, but by then, her path was already leading toward the role that would make her a household name. When Bewitched first flickered onto television screens in 1964, it introduced audiences to a new kind of heroine, the charming, quick-witted, and quietly rebellious witch next door, Samantha Stevens, brought to life by Elizabeth Montgomery. Paired with Dick York and later Dick Sargent as her bewildered mortal husband, Darren, Montgomery created a character who effortlessly balanced magic and mischief with domestic suburban life. The chemistry was irresistible, and viewers couldn't get enough. As the series found its rhythm, Montgomery added another layer of fun by stepping into the role of Samantha's mischievous, dark-haired cousin Serena, credited cheekily under the pseudonym Pandora Spox, a playful pun on the infamous Pandora's box, hinting at the trouble Serena would inevitably stir up. Bewitched wasn't just another sitcom, it was a phenomenon. At its peak, it was the highest-rated series ABC had ever seen, a shimmering jewel in the network's crown. The show ran for 8 seasons, from 1964 to 1972, and Montgomery's performance earned her 5 Primetime Emmy nominations and 4 Golden Globe nods, a testament to the spell she cast over audiences week after week. But while the on-screen magic was effortless, the behind-the-scenes story was more complicated. By the show's later seasons, ratings had begun to wane, yet ABC still ordered a 9th season, hoping to rekindle the early success. However, trouble was brewing. Montgomery's marriage to Bewitched director and producer William Asher was unraveling, and the tension between them bled into their professional lives. By the end of the 8th season, the two had separated, and any hopes for a final year of Bewitched quietly dissolved. In an attempt to soften the blow for the network, Montgomery and Asher, through their production company Ashmont, pitched a new project, The Paul Lynde Show, a sitcom built around the acerbic, sharp-tongued comedian Paul Lynde, who'd become a familiar face on Bewitched. The show, however, failed to capture the same lightning-in-a-bottle appeal and lasted just a single season. Montgomery, never one to take herself too seriously, even poked fun at her iconic role. In 1965, she made a delightful cameo as a beach party witch in How to Stuff a Wild Bikini, directed by Asher, blending real-life romance and real-life humor. That same year, she lent her unmistakable voice to an episode of The Flintstones, playing, who else? A magically inclined character, named Samantha, allowing even animated Bedrock to get a taste of her enchantment. Long after Bewitched had flickered off American screens, Elizabeth Montgomery found a surprising way to keep the magic alive, halfway around the world. From 1980 to 1983, she starred in a series of Japanese television commercials for Lotta's Mother chocolate biscuits and cookies, complete with the signature nose twitch that had made her famous as Samantha Stevens. While the Hollywood spotlight dimmed for a time, these quirky ads not only delighted Japanese audiences, but also provided Montgomery with a generous paycheck, all while she stayed comfortably out of view from her American fans and the industry that had once adored her. Back in the United States, Montgomery deliberately veered away from the sunny, suburban sorcery of her Bewitched days. Determined to prove herself as a serious dramatic actress, she took on a series of powerful, often harrowing roles that showcased the depth and grit many had overlooked. One of her boldest performances came in A Case of Rape, 1974, where she portrayed a woman fighting for justice after a brutal assault. a performance so raw and brave it earned her an Emmy nomination. The following year, she stepped into darker territory still, taking on the infamous role of Lizzie Borden, the accused axe murderer in The Legend of Lizzie Borden. It wasn't until after her death that genealogist Rhonda McClure unearthed a strange twist. Montgomery and the real Lizzie Borden were distant cousins. Television audiences, however, never lost their affection for Montgomery's sharp wit and easy charm. She became a beloved staple on the popular game show Password, where host Alan Ludden affectionately dubbed her the Queen of Password. Even in the intense world of dramatic miniseries, Montgomery's talent refused to be boxed in. In the EC, Awakening Land, 1978, she convincingly embodied a pioneer woman struggling to carve out a life in the rugged Ohio frontier, earning yet another Emmy nomination, her 9th. The late 70s and 80s saw Montgomery continuing to take bold, unexpected roles. In A Killing Affair, 1977, she played a tough police detective entangled in a risky relationship with her married partner, portrayed by O.J. Simpson. She wasn't afraid to venture into villainy either, delivering a chilling turn as an abusive nurse tormenting elderly patients, including Kirk Douglas, in Amos, 1985. In a touching return to the stage, Montgomery appeared on Broadway in 1989's Love Letters, alongside longtime companion Robert Foxworth, delivering a performance filled with poignancy and quiet elegance. Her career's final chapter included a memorable voice role as a spirited barmaid in an episode of Batman, the animated series titled Showdown. The episode aired after her death, a bittersweet farewell to a performer who had given decades of unforgettable characters. Montgomery's last major project was a crime drama based on Edna Buchanan's novels, with the second film in the series premiering on May 9, 1995, a mere 9 days before her passing. In a career marked by enchantment, resilience, and bold reinvention, Elizabeth Montgomery left behind a legacy that proved her magic was never confined to the twitch of a nose. Elizabeth Montgomery's personal life was as layered and eventful as the roles she played on screen, marked by passionate romances, public unions, and private heartbreaks. In 1954, still early in her career, she married New York City socialite, Frederick Gallatin Kemen. The marriage was brief, dissolving in less than a year, a quiet prologue to a series of more storied relationships to come. 2 years later, she wed Academy Award-winning actor Gig Young, a union that lasted from 1956 to 1963. Not long after that chapter closed, Montgomery married director and producer William Asher, a partnership that would intertwine both their professional and personal worlds. Together, they welcomed 3 children, William, Robert, and Rebecca. In a charming twist of art imitating life, her real-life pregnancies with Robert and Rebecca were written into Bewitched, allowing Samantha Stevens to navigate the ups and downs of motherhood while still casting spells and managing meddling relatives. But even a seemingly enchanted life can grow complicated. During the 8th season of Bewitched, Montgomery fell in love with director Richard Michaels, igniting an affair that would lead to the unraveling of both their marriages and, ultimately, the end of the beloved series. After the cameras stopped rolling in 1972, the pair moved in together, their relationship lasting 2.5 intense years before quietly coming to a close. In a story of love that matured with time, Montgomery eventually found lasting companionship with actor Robert Foxworth. They shared nearly 2 decades together before officially marrying on January 28, 1993. It was a union built on friendship, mutual respect, and a long history of shared experiences, one that endured until her passing in 1995. Rumors of other romances colored the margins of Montgomery's life as well. According to biographer Herbie J. Pilato, she was briefly involved with Russian ballet star Alexander Godunov while living with Foxworth but before they married. In a strange, somber coincidence, Godunov was discovered dead on May 18, 1995, the very same day Montgomery herself passed away, though reports later revealed he had likely died days earlier. One constant thread through Montgomery's often tumultuous, personal narrative was her connection to Paterson, New York. The quiet town in Putnam County, rich with rolling hills and winding country roads, was where the Montgomery family homestead stood and where Elizabeth spent her childhood summers. The little town's name surfaced frequently in Bewitched, a subtle nod to the actress's roots. In later years, her mother took up residence in the family farmhouse on Cushman Road, keeping that link to Montgomery's early memories alive long after Hollywood had claimed her as its own. Beyond the twitch of her famous nose and the sparkle of television magic, Elizabeth Montgomery carried a fierce, unflinching heart for justice, equality, and compassion. She wasn't just a beloved actress, she was a woman of conviction, using her voice, her influence, and her resources to champion causes close to her soul. At a time when many celebrities carefully sidestepped controversy, Montgomery boldly stepped forward, becoming a vocal advocate for progressive, liberal issues that others shied away from. Animal rights, women's rights, LGBTQ+ advocacy, and HIV/AIDS awareness weren't just trending topics for her, they were battles worth fighting. She poured her time, energy, and finances into these movements, standing beside marginalized communities, and those whose voices often went unheard. Her passion for social justice was evident early on when she publicly condemned the Vietnam War, a stance that alienated her from some circles but earned her lifelong respect in others. She campaigned for Robert F. Kennedy's presidential bid in 1968, drawn to his message of hope and equality, and decades later, she and her partner Robert Foxworth lent their support to Jesse Jackson's 1988 presidential run, never content to stay silent in the face of injustice. Professionally, Montgomery wasn't afraid to align her work with her values. She narrated Cover-Up, Behind the Iran-Contra Affair in 1988, an unflinching political documentary that exposed corruption within U.S. foreign policy, and followed It Up, by lending her voice to the Panama Deception, a searing Academy Award-winning exposé on American military intervention in Panama. These were not safe projects for a star of her stature, but Montgomery didn't measure her choices by how they might be received. She measured them by their impact. Perhaps one of the most touching, quietly revolutionary moments in her later life came in 1992. Montgomery joined her bewitched co-star and close friend Dick Sargent as co-grand marshals of the Los Angeles Gay Pride Parade. It wasn't just a nostalgic reunion, it was a public, heartfelt stand for love, acceptance, and equality. At a time when the LGBTQ+ community was still fighting desperately for recognition and rights, her visible, loving support meant something, and she knew it. For Elizabeth Montgomery, activism wasn't a side project or a public relations strategy. It was woven into the fabric of her being, a natural extension of a woman who spent her life believing in the dignity of others. In the final chapter of her life, Elizabeth Montgomery's compassion never dimmed, nor did her commitment to making the world a little more humane and kind for those in need. Even as illness quietly crept in, she poured her heart into causes that mattered, choosing to spend her time lifting up others rather than dwelling on her own struggles. One of her most personal passions during that last year was her work with Learning Allies Los Angeles Unit, a nonprofit dedicated to recording educational audiobooks for people with disabilities, an organization offering not just knowledge, but dignity and connection for those often left on the margins. Montgomery wasn't content to merely lend her famous name. She volunteered actively, giving her time in recording studios and even producing a series of radio and television public service announcements for the organization in 1994. Her voice, warm and familiar to generations of fans, became a bridge for those who couldn't easily hold a book in their hands or see its pages. In January 1995, With a quiet grace that seemed to define her, she recorded a cherished classic, the 1952 edition of When We Were Very Young by A. Milne, a project that would turn out to be one of her final public contributions. Her generosity and spirit lingered long after she was gone. On June 3, 1995, just 16 days after her passing, Learning Allies Los Angeles unit paid tribute to Montgomery by dedicating their annual record-a-thon in her honor. It wasn't just a symbolic gesture. 21 other celebrities joined in, lending their voices to a special recorded edition of Chicken Soup for the Soul, a collection of heartwarming, hopeful stories that echoed Montgomery's own belief in kindness, resilience, and the quiet power of love. In many ways, it was a perfect farewell to a woman who had spent her life giving voice to the unheard, and whose memory would continue to resonate far beyond the final credits of any show. As Elizabeth Montgomery's remarkable life drew to a close, she faced her final days with the same quiet resolve and grace that had defined her decades in the public eye. Diagnosed with colon cancer after brushing off what she assumed were lingering flu symptoms during the filming of Deadline for Murder. From the files of Edna Buchanan, in March 1995, she discovered too late that the illness had already spread to her liver. The prognosis offered no hope of recovery, and with the clarity of someone who always seemed to understand what truly mattered, Montgomery made the decision not to spend her remaining time in the sterile, impersonal halls of a hospital. Instead, she chose to return to the sanctuary of her Beverly Hills home, the place she'd built and shared with Robert Foxworth, and where the walls held the echoes of laughter, love, and a life well lived. That house wasn't just a home. It was a sprawling 26-room mansion tucked in the lush, sun-drenched hills of Beverly Hills, a haven far removed from the glare of Hollywood's public stages. Every inch of it bore Montgomery's touch, from the airy, sunlit rooms filled with warm wood tones and eclectic art to the serene gardens that offered shade and stillness when she needed it most. It was here, in the embrace of those familiar walls, surrounded by Foxworth and the 3 children she shared with director William Asher, that Montgomery quietly slipped away on the morning of May 18, 1995, at the age of 62. Montgomery's life, however, stretched far beyond the gates of Beverly Hills. She also owned a stunning 5-bedroom lakefront mansion in Agoura Hills, a retreat she'd designed and built from the ground up, pouring her love for nature and privacy into every detail. And on the other side of the country, she held on to a piece of her past, her parents' sprawling 20-acre estate in Putnam County, New York. Once part of Wonder Lake State Park, the property had been a family refuge and a place of childhood, summers, long walks, and memories that predated stardom. A month after her passing, on June 18, 1995, those who knew and loved her gathered at the Cannon Theater in Beverly Hills to remember a woman who was so much more than her television roles. Jazz legend Herbie Hancock played, Amanda McBroom sang, and writer Dominic Dunn shared stories from their younger days in New York City. Foxworth, visibly moved, read aloud some of the many letters and sympathy cards sent by devoted fans. Their words a testament to the deep connection Montgomery had forged with people she'd never met. Her daughter, her brother, her stepson, and her nurse each took their turn to speak, painting a portrait of a woman whose warmth, humor, and courage touched lives in ways far beyond the camera's gaze. In the end, Elizabeth Montgomery left behind more than just mansions and a cherished catalog of film and television roles. She left behind a legacy of empathy, activism, and authenticity, a life filled with both dazzling light and deep shadows, lived entirely on her own terms.